Well, good afternoon, everyone. Pastor Corey back with another episode on our podcast Time Together. And again, remember, if you have questions or comments or things that you would like to learn more about Christianity, please leave a comment in the comment section, and we will turn your questions, your critiques, your comments into podcast episodes. This question comes from a while ago on a daily devotional I did. It comes from Amacticdeller7519, who asks, if God is so powerful, why didn't he just kill Satan? And I did a video a while ago about how Satan's not able to stop God. It was a daily devotional, and he had asked this question to say, well, if I claim God is so powerful, why is Satan still around? And basically, if I could expand what he had originally asked, what people often ask is, why is there evil? Why is there suffering? Why is there pain? And really, they want to know where does God fit into a world that has evil, a world that has suffering, and how can we claim to believe in God when there's so much pain in this world? And this is actually a branch of theology in a centuries-old debate, the branch of theology known as theodicy. Theodicy is the kind of like the theology of the problem with pain. Theodicy, Theodicy. Theodicy is how it's pronounced, and it's the philosophy of the problem with evil, the problem with pain, the problem with suffering, and it really focuses on how should a Christian respond to this problem with pain, and what does it mean what is God's response to this, and what does it mean to serve God and yet live with so much pain and so much suffering? You see, the problem that's created when we focus on evil or when we focus on pain and suffering is many critics of Christianity wonder, how can we claim to believe in an all-powerful, all-loving, omnipotent God who's all-knowing, who has the power to foresee the future, and who loves us so much, and how can we claim to believe in this God when there is so much suffering, when there's so much pain in the world? And the people want to know, what is God doing? In fact, many critics have said, well, if he is God, what is he doing? And so the problem of pain and evil is it creates a lot of questions surrounding the omnipotence of God or the goodness of God. And while this is a century-old debate, it has been made popular by the Greek philosopher Epicurus, and it's still made popular in popular media. You see, the problem is we call into question God's moral character when we see all the suffering in this world. And in some cases, I've seen people where they actually blame God for all the pain and all the suffering. Now, to get into this, I want to just first kind of understand where people are coming from, especially those who are atheists, or those who are agnostic, or even those who believe in God, and they're trying to understand, they're trying to wrap their head around how can God allow all this pain and all this suffering to go on. Epicurus, he had a very big dialogue about this kind of theodicy, and really kind of the problem that pain creates, because the people knew, and I'll start with a couple assumptions. The people knew that the Christians would believe, and as I believe, in an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God. So all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving God. And Epicurus brought this discussion to light, and he says, well, is your God really all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving? Because in his mind, he said, if your God is all these things, if he's all-powerful, if he's all-knowing and all-loving, then there shouldn't be any kind of suffering in the world. And so he asked several questions, and he said, first, he says, is your God willing to prevent evil but not able? He says, if you claim to have an all-loving God, then he should be more than willing to prevent evil, but is not able. He says, then he is not omnipotent. It says, is he able, but he's not willing? He says, then he is malevolent, which is having or wishing evil. He says, is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? He says, if you claim to have a God who is able to help and willing to help, then why is there evil? And then he finally said, if he is neither able nor willing, then why call him God? Basically, he's throwing down this challenge to say, what is God doing? He says, you want me to believe in an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God? He says, how can I do that when there's so much evil in the world? He says something has to give. Either your God is not willing, he's not able, or both. And so he says if he's not willing, then he's malevolent, which is having or wishing evil. If he's not able, he's not omnipotent, and if he's neither able nor willing, he says, then why is he God? Again, he's saying, and almost he's kind of reducing God down to almost like a genie whose only purpose in life is to help him out. And even though most of us are probably not familiar with Epicurus, the debate is still popular and still very much alive in circles today. Now, popular media, for example, if you saw the Dawn of Justice movie, Batman vs. Superman, Lex Luthor said, if God is all-powerful, he cannot be all good, and if he is all good, then he cannot be all-powerful. Again, dealing with the suffering in this world, he says, how can we claim that God is both all good and all powerful when there's so many bad things that happen? And the age-old saying, maybe you're familiar with the saying, the saying by Lord Acton, he's a British historian. He says, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so this idea of an all-powerful God is really hard for people to understand when they see so many problems in the world. And what's interesting to me is the Bible actually does talk over and over again about the problem of pain and the problem of evil, the problem with sin. Habakkuk 1 verses 2 to 4 brings up this idea of the problem of pain. In Habakkuk 1 verses 2 through 4, it says, how long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you don't listen to me. Violence is everywhere, I cry, but you don't come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I am surrounded by people who love to argue and fight. The law has become paralyzed, and there is no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so justice has become perverted. So Habakkuk, a prophet of God, cries out and says, Lord, I've cried out to you. He says, I still see all this evil. Another famous one is in Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes 4, beginning in verse 1, it says, again, I've observed all the oppression that takes place under the sun, which is apart from God, as in the world. He says, and I saw the tears of the oppressed with no one to comfort them. The oppressors have great power, and their victims are helpless. So I conclude that the dead are better off than the living. But most fortunate are those who have not yet been born, for they have not seen all the evil that is done under the sun. Then I observe that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbor. But this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. And so, again, even Solomon, the wisest person on earth, struggled with this. He says, I see oppression. He says, those that are oppressed, they are hopeless, they are helpless, and there is no one to comfort them. You see, the problem that's created with this evil and with the sin that's going on in the world is it really, really begins to we really start to question God. Is God up there? Is he real? And if he is, does he even care? Because many people have mentioned, they said, if he cares, then why isn't he doing something about that? And so this is a fantastic question and an important discussion because this is where many, many people are at. I've been very, very blessed in my life. I have not known all that much tragedy. I had my grandfather passed away when I was young, and so both my grandfathers actually when I was pretty young, and so that's probably been the hardest tragedy in my life so far, to lose both my grandfathers. But even that they were older and I was younger at the time, so I don't remember a lot of the pain. I mean, I still miss them both. But I've been very blessed in the fact that I have not had a whole lot of tragedy. But I know that's not always the case, and I know that there are many, 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 many people suffering. And I cannot even presume to know how it feels. I'm thinking of a family who lost a child. Another family who told me, who I just found out their son has been diagnosed with with an incurable disease and a genetic disorder, and he's just a baby, and the doctors told the parents to take him home and enjoy what time they have left. I cannot even begin to imagine what that feels like. I have seen many different people with many different problems, especially being a pastor. I'm often told of all of these different people's problems, and every time I hear this, I just want to comfort them. I just want to do what I can to take it away. And I think the most accurate kind of portrayal of this problem with evil is one of my church members. When their husband was passing away, they had told me, they said, I believe fully in the goodness of God. I believe that God is all good. I believe in the God of the Bible who promises to take care of us, who promises to help. She had mentioned, she says, it's just so hard for me to see God's goodness here and now. And then that is a perfectly valid response. That is a perfectly valid statement to the fact that says, I know I have faith in this God. I have faith in the God of the Bible, but it's just hard for me to see his goodness. It's just hard for me to maintain that faith in this time of struggle. And so this is a issue in a conversation that we must have, because it's on the forefront of many people's minds. I have been often criticized for believing in the God of the Bible and believing in Jesus as Lord. And one of the biggest criticisms that people level against me is, how can I claim to believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God when there is so much evil in the world? And the problem becomes, when you start looking at the character of God, God is all good, as I claim, and I believe that fully. Then, and so I believe, the Bible calls it benevolent. I believe in that. And so then the question is often asked, then he doesn't want evil, right? And I would say, yes, he doesn't want evil. God is all powerful, what we call omnipotent, and I would say yes. And then he can stop evil. Yes, of course, I would agree with you. And it says God is all knowing, and that would be omniscient, as is the Scrabble word. And so he knows that evil is going to happen. He knows about it ahead of time, and I would say yes. We have an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, all-loving God. And so then the problem this creates is people ask, then why is there evil? Why is there evil if we have a God who is all good, who doesn't want evil, a God who is all powerful, able to stop evil, and a God who is all knowing, who knows about evil ahead of time? Why is it? And I've had people ask me before, why is God doing this to my child? I think of the child sickness. Why is it happening to my child? Why, when I pray for healing, why don't I receive it? Why is there still suffering? Why is there still evil? Why is there still brokenness? And my heart goes out to those people, because, again, I can sympathize with them, but I myself have not experienced a whole lot of tragedy, and I understand that it's very, very hard to hear about this good God when you don't see this goodness in life. And I will say, for the most part, when people tell me they can't see God's goodness, it's a temporary thing, because their grief or their suffering overwhelms them. But as soon as you can get your perspective changed, where you're not focusing on your grief or your problems and you're focusing on God, it becomes a lot easier to see the goodness of God. And so in people's minds, and especially I'm thinking of people of the world, something has to give. Either he is not all powerful, either he is not all loving, or either he is not God. And Eric Sentel had this quote. He says, an all-loving God would not want anyone to experience evil or unnecessary suffering. An all-knowing God would possess the knowledge to anticipate it, and an all-powerful God would possess the means to prevent it. And so this is his struggle, where he says something has to give. An all-loving God would not want suffering. An all-knowing God would be able to see suffering before it happens. And an all-loving God, or an all-powerful God, would have the means to stop it. And so there has been several popular ways to justify suffering and evil in this world. And I'll use the scriptures for several that I'm giving, and I happen to believe in them all, and I will explain kind of what those are and kind of where I believe in them. But I also think that there's a much bigger thing going on that we don't often focus on. So I'm going to go through these several justifications and these several popular arguments, and then more likely than not, probably next week, I'll finish up this video on kind of bringing it all together, and how can we believe in a God when there's so much pain and so much suffering in the world, and eventually deal with the question of, why didn't God just kill Satan? Why is Satan still present in this world? Why is he still allowed to do the evil things that he does. So first popular argument, and maybe you've heard this before, everything happens for a reason. You can think of this as the story of you lose a job, and then next week you get a job that's even better, your dream job. Everything happens for a reason. And we actually do see this in the scriptures. Not so much the fact that everything intentionally God is sending it so good things can happen, but we see it in the scripture that God can work bad things for our good. In fact, it says this in Romans 8:28. It says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them." And so this idea of everything happens for a reason. One of the critiques of this is why would God have to use the bad things? Why would God be vindictive like that and cause bad things just to later give good things? And again, I want to stay away from this idea of God causing the bad things, and I'll explain that probably in my next video. But we do see in the scriptures, and we can have faith in that God will work everything out for our good. All the suffering, all the tragedy, all that goes on, no matter how bad it seems right in the moment, and no matter how bad it perfectly is, or no matter how bad it is perfectly valid for us to say that God will eventually use it for our good. Even if we don't know how, even if we don't see it, and even if maybe we won't see how He did it until we're standing next to Him in glory. But this is where faith comes in. The faith in the Bible, the faith in God that says, I don't know how you're going to do this, Lord, but I know for a fact that your word tells me you will turn it and use it for my good, and I believe that. So again, not so much that God causes it, not so much that God sends it just to help us, but it is true. God uses it and works it for our good. Now, one of the atheists, they critique this. They say this argument sounds a lot like superstition. This idea of everything balances out. It's not superstition. It's what the Word of God says. Again, the bad things are worked out for the good of those. And again, notice very clearly, for the good of those who are loved by God and are called according to His purpose for them. And so, if you want God to work something out for your good, if you want God to take the tragedies and turn them, as David would say, turn my mourning into praises, there's essential things you have to do. First, you have to love God back. And second, you have to follow His purpose for your life. You are not going to find perfect peace. You're not going to find happiness apart from God's will for your life. And if you are outside of God's will, then you can't really expect Him to interject His own will and turn your tragedy into praises. That's something that comes from a relationship with Him. Another common argument is that it is an opportunity for growth. And again, I would echo that, yes, absolutely, tragedy, suffering, problems, it is an opportunity for growth. As it says in James 1 verse 2, it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider an opportunity for great joy. For you know when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." So again, this idea that everything is an opportunity for growth. The suffering, the trials, the hardship, it is an opportunity for great growth. And this argument, again, is still not well received because people are saying, well, why would God use this to grow me? Why can't I grow another way? But again, I still affirm this and believe this, that it is an opportunity for growth. And a lot of times, and again, it's not so much God is sending these troubles to grow us, but He is working with us to grow through our troubles. And another popular argument is the blame game. We as Christians often blame Satan, and I will echo that and say, yes, Satan is the source of evil. He's the source of bad. John 10:10 says the thief's purpose, being Satan, is to steal, kill, and destroy. But my purpose, this is Jesus' purpose, is to give them a rich and satisfying life. But of course, the argument is that if Satan is really the source of evil, Satan was created by God, and therefore God created evil, and therefore it's God's fault. And I've heard many agnostics, many atheists make this point to say, well, it's really God's fault. If you trace it all the way back, it is God's fault. And now one of the most important concepts and one of the most important justifications for all this suffering has to come from the free will argument. Now, I'm not here to discuss whether or not we have a free will. I will put it. I did a series on that, and I'll put the link to that video at the end of this video. But I fully believe we do have a free will. And again, listen to that other video if you like to see why I believe we have a free will. But critics say, even if our free will is the cause of this, is our free will, is the flesh, is Satan more powerful than God? And the argument is, of course not. But God respects our freedom. God gives us the ability to choose. He gives us the ability to make choices, and those choices have consequences, whether good or bad. Think of Adam and Eve when they sinned in the garden. God gave them a choice, said, follow me, or follow after what you want. And Adam and Eve chose, and there was sin that came from that, and sin and suffering. And really, the problem with evil is a problem with sin, as we'll get into. You see, the problem with the free will argument that many people don't like is it puts the blame on us, and people don't like that. They immediately want to shift the blame to God. But I will say free will is one of the biggest reasons why we have pain, why we have suffering, why we have all these problems that we have. But again, we would prefer, and many atheists especially prefer to blame God about this. And so the popular conclusions they have come to is God won't stop evil, God can't stop evil, or God does not exist. And again, is if God is good and God is all powerful, is he really God? I mean, is he really able to stop evil? And the answer is yes. And so in what they have come to the conclusion is if God is good and can stop evil but does not stop evil, is he really all that good? So again, many people would like the conclusion of God does not exist. However, that's not something I'm willing to even say is even a little bit true or even a little bit of a possibility. The God of the Bible is real. He is Lord of the universe. He is God of all creation. It's not an option. Despite what the atheists say, there is a God. There is a creator. There is an all-powerful God of the universe who gave us his one and only Son. So again, then the question has to be asked. Is he good? What is he doing to stop evil? And how can we know that he cares for us? How can we know that he loves us? So again, the popular arguments, just to go over them one more time, is everything happens for a reason. It's an opportunity for growth. We blame Satan or blame God. And finally, we land on our free will. And we will pick this back up next week, where we will get into how we can respond to this and how we can discuss with people where evil fits in. And is God really, because I fully believe in an all-powerful, all-loving, all-knowing God. And so then the problem that the people come up with is then what do we do with evil? What do we do with the conversation surrounding sin, surrounding suffering? And how can we believe in an all-powerful God who allows all of this evil to go on? And so I hope to see you next week. Hopefully this has kind of helped lay out the issue for you. If you have some other things you'd like to add or comment about this video, or some things maybe I brushed over that you think I misrepresented, please leave a comment. We could discuss that too. But until next week, I do want to just leave you on a note of my personal beliefs. I believe in an all-powerful, all-loving, all-knowing God as the Bible describes. This God is King of the universe. This God is Lord of all creation. He is the Creator. He is the Redeemer. He sent His only Son, Jesus, to die for our sins. Yes, there is evil in the world. Yes, there is sin and there is suffering. But as we will see next week, it's not God's fault. It's ours. And when I say it's our fault, I'm not meaning that your problems are punishment for any one specific sin, but I'm meaning it's because we, as a people, we sinned. Adam and Eve sinned, the original sin. And sin brought death, pain, and suffering. And so what I want us to see next week, and what I will discuss next week, is the fact that A, God is not the one who caused all this evil, and B, God is the one who is working tirelessly and doing everything He can to conquer and vanquish evil. And then number 3, we will see that God, there will be a day where all evil will be vanquished and Satan will be thrown into hell for eternity. But until then, my prayers are with you. If you are listening to this and you are suffering, if you are listening to this and you are going through having issues, or you are having difficulty trusting the goodness of God, I pray that you would come to see God's goodness. And again, as we will discuss next week, don't focus on your problems. Focus on the one who is helping you through them. God never promised us an easy life, as we'll look at next week, but He always promised to get us to the other side. He always promised to carry us through if we will trust in Him. So trust in Him today, lean on Him, and let Him deliver you from your problems. So until next week, I hope you have a great rest of your week.